8:45, and this Thursday is the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo. As you will doubtless know, Napoleon finally got his comeuppance at the hands of the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian Marshal Blücher. But what are the men who fought the battle? The ordinary British soldiers, once famously described by Wellington as the scum of the earth. More than 100 of them came from one school, the Royal Military Asylum in Chelsea, set up to educate the orphaned sons of servicemen. It's now known as the Duke of York School, just outside Dover. Nick Higham been there.
In 106.
A special Waterloo memorial service in the chapel at the Duke of York's military school, complete with character-building address.
But for you, as Dukies, the battle should remind you of the service and sacrifice of your forebearers.
21 ex-pupils fought in the ranks at Waterloo. The school didn't cater for the officer class. Chris Crowcroft is a former Dukie.
Half of them were in fact drummers and cavalry trumpeters, and their age ranged from the youngest, a couple of cavalry trumpeters who were only aged 14, and the oldest and the highest ranking, a corporal, was 22 years old.
Today's Dukies are impressed by their predecessors.
I've seen the film Waterloo, so the way that was portrayed, it was very scary, frightening, especially the fact that boys as young as 14 were involved. That's just shocking.
I think the main thing that goes through my mind is that sense that, thank goodness, that's not me. And even being there, the adrenaline rush they must have had.
What do you think kept them going?
I think trying to make their parents proud, their country proud.
But Dukies weren't typical of Wellington's army. They'd been educated and well fed. They were respectable. Colin Brown is the author of Scum of the Earth, the phrase Wellington himself used to describe his soldiers a few years before Waterloo.
Wellington was being a matter of fact about it. He was saying they were the dregs of society, and to join the army, you had to be running away from something, either imprisonment or the pregnancy of your girlfriend, or sheer hunger.
Many started the day of the battle in a sorry state.
There were terrible storms that swept across the battlefield on the eve of the battle. Men were out in the fields trying to get what cover they could. And in the morning, they were in a terrible condition. They were starving. They were cold, wet, and some of them were drunk.
Nonetheless, Wellington's army behaved with great bravery, Dukies among them. Chris Crowcroft describes what happened to one.
George Gilman, who was in the very first intake of the school in 1803, in the very first cart with his sister Arabella. He's 19 years old at the time of Waterloo, and he is in the 27th foot, the Inniskillings. And the Inniskillings took between 50 and 70% casualties and were described as lying dead in square. And I cannot imagine what it must have been like for him as a 19-year-old, except that he survived.
The men of Wellington's army marched and died to the beat of drums and the call of bugles and trumpets. This was battlefield command and control, early 19th century style. Major David Cresswell is the school's director of military music.
The regiment would be educated as to what the calls meant. When you hear this is your call, their regimental call, they would all know it. And then they'd be taught various other calls, what they meant, so that we're on the battlefield, they'd hear their call, oh, listen up, that's us, oh, we're charging.
For many who fought, their reward was poverty and an early death. Colin Brown again.
It was terribly difficult to find work in 1816 because thousands of soldiers were laid off. There were already cotton spinners and weavers, textile workers, farm labourers, all thrown out of work because there was a slump after the war.
And even at the Duke of York's school, it seems the heroes of Waterloo were swiftly forgotten. In the chapel, a memorial tablet bears the names of those ex-pupils who died in the Peninsular War, but not those who died at Waterloo. Stephen Saunderson is the vice-principal.
Was it an administrative oversight? Was it that the paperwork was lost somewhere in the chain of command? I don't know. But now that we've identified not only the 21 Dukies who fought in the Waterloo campaign, but the 2 who fell, we will add their names to this roll of honour as well.
That was Nick Higham reporting. The time is 10 to 9. There's a